Hi everybody, this is Kathy Shizuka. I'm Executive Editor of School Library Journal, and on behalf of SLJ and Library Journal, I wanted to welcome all of you to the Maker Workshop. With this broadcast, of course, we are kicking off our 4-week session, part of the Lead the Change Professional Learning Series, and I'd like to shout out thanks to our sponsor, Little Bits, and to you, of course, participants. The discussion forum is buzzing. I'm seeing many cool ideas being shared, and at the same time people making connections and expanding their networks. So if you haven't already, please check it out and introduce yourself and dive right into the conversation on making learning in libraries, all good stuff. Thank you again to Tim and to Peter for that provocative and inspiring first session. We can all connect via Twitter. Just as a reminder, use the hashtag LTCMaker. And now to the second part of our program. Mark Takano has uniquely served California's 41st District both as a congressman and a classroom teacher. Elected to the House in 2012, he serves on congressional committees for Veterans Affairs, Education and the Workforce, and Science, Space, and Technology. And he has also weighed in on and helped advance many issues ranging from ESEA reauthorization and marriage equality. Among the founders of the Congressional Maker Caucus, Takano has some ideas about the Maker movement and its potential broader implications for the U.S. economy. So with that, it is my pleasure to welcome Congressman Mark Takano.
Good evening. I'd like to start off by thanking the Library Journal and the School Library Journal for the opportunity to discuss the effect of the Maker movement on the American economy. As some of you may know, before being elected to Congress, I worked for 23 years as a high school teacher and served for more than 20 years as a community college trustee. I often tell people that I'm still a teacher on special assignment to Congress. I've only been a member of Congress since 2013, but during my first year, I set out on a journey to visit 100 businesses in my district in 100 days. It actually ended up taking about 150 days, but I learned a lot about my congressional district that year. Along the way, it was a visit to Vocabulary, a makerspace in Riverside, which first sparked my interest in the maker movement. I remember calling my legislative director, and I tried to explain to him about this space with 3D printers and laser cutters and people working on craft projects. Thankfully, he knew exactly what I was talking about and said, "It sounds like you visited a makerspace." Well, I brought this experience back to Washington, and I shared it with my colleagues. And while most of my colleagues had no idea what I was talking about, they could all understand the way that innovation and technology was changing our economy. Colleagues on both sides of the aisle understand the need for improving STEM education to create a pipeline to fill the new jobs being created, and the potential of what I was describing. Along the way, I did find a few colleagues who had visited makerspaces in their own districts, and like me, they wanted to figure out how we could support the maker movement in our country. These discussions led to the formation of the Congressional Maker Caucus, now 34 members strong, comprised of members of both parties from all over the country. We've hosted briefings for members and staffers on topics such as making and education and the future of manufacturing in America. This year, I was proud to join the Institute of Museum and Library Services and host the very first Capitol Hill Maker Faire. For many of my colleagues, this was the first time they had been able to see firsthand the energy and excitement of the Maker movement. I have a picture from the Capitol Hill Maker Faire of myself and Congressman Steny Hoyer, a senior member of the Democratic Party, staring up in awe at a wind tube used to teach the basics of aerodynamics. I'm also excited to announce that the Maker Caucus has hired its very first full-time fellow, an experienced STEM teacher from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, named Teresa Sappington. Now, the Maker movement is a grassroots effort that describes a group of people who design and create their own products. It is a tech-focused social initiative built around trying, failing, tinkering, innovating, and then sharing those lessons learned along the way. Makers include everything from arts and crafts to building and programming robots and 3D printing. The Maker movement is constantly changing and evolving. And one of the most recent developments is the DIY bio movement, which uses the same principles of tinkering and sharing that embodies the Maker movement and applies them to biotechnology. Now, making can be found in homes, garages, maker spaces, educational settings, and libraries, including the libraries of my district, which recently received a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to purchase 3D printers. Often, maker spaces operate on a gym membership type business model. For an average of $100 a month, members receive access to millions of dollars worth of advanced manufacturing equipment. Once members are trained, they can use that equipment for any type of project they want to pursue. But we can do more to democratize in our districts and towns and communities. And that's where libraries fit in. They have a lower bar to entry, and while maker spaces provide classes, they're not as inviting or as geared for first-timers as classes in libraries are. The beauty of the movement is that it looks different in each community depending on the talents, needs, and interests of the makers. The key is to have people such as you who are passionate about learning and can build a support system of business and industry, educators, policymakers, and technical experts to support the movement. Communities that work together to offer multiple and diverse opportunities in making have the greatest success. As a central part of many communities, libraries and schools hold a unique position in helping to determine the direction of their local maker communities. A few months ago, I wrote an article entitled, "The Maker Movement is About the Economy, Stupid." That's a riff-off of Bill Clinton's campaign slogan, and in it, I made the argument that the Maker Movement is the catalyst that will bring manufacturing jobs back to America. As we all know, the last few decades have seen a steep decrease in domestic manufacturing. Analysts were resigned to the idea that labor costs in Asia and Mexico would never allow us to be competitive, and that we needed to shift the fundamentals of our economy to reflect this. We shut down factories, focused on the creation of vast supply networks, and began retraining our students to look for jobs outside of factories. However, rapid changes in technology over the last 15 years have caused business models to change. Now makers are applying digital information and creativity to the physical world, which is driving changes to the fundamentals of manufacturing. We are on the cusp of another, albeit very different, American Industrial Revolution. Consumers are demanding higher quality goods that provide a more personal experience. An example I'll share is of Anton Willis, an avid kayaker who, after moving into a San Francisco apartment, had no place to keep his kayak. He brainstormed a solution: to build a folding kayak out of corrugated plastic that would fit in his closet. Now that idea has become a successful business known as Oru Kayaks, which are designed and manufactured in California. Their website boasts, "We're proud to be part of a new wave of American manufacturing focused on quality, flexibility, and continuous innovation. We believe in American workers, American suppliers, and American quality." Along the way from idea to business, he used a variety of new tools now available to the American innovator. The first step required him to create a prototype, and since his apartment wasn't large enough to hold a kayak, and also wasn't large enough to hold the tools he needed to create one of the 20 full-scale prototypes he initially put together. However, Anton was a member of a makerspace in San Francisco. Anton's team worked on dozens of small paper prototypes before they began the process of fabricating their full-size prototype. They worked with a number of traditional shop tools for fabricating in metal and plastic, and then they added in more advanced tools and computer numerical control machines, also known as CNC machines. Thankfully, the cost of these machines and the technical knowledge needed to use them have dropped in the last few years. Well, once Anton had a solid prototype, he needed to scale up production to take it to market, which meant he needed capital. He used the popular crowdsourcing website Kickstarter to raise money from future customers, rather than having to pitch his idea to investors that might not see his vision, or share his experience as a kayaker looking for a solution to a common problem. Now, his fundraising goal was originally $80,000, but he quickly blew past that amount and raised $443,000. Now, this is the story of one business, but this is happening across the country. Artisans, makers, and small-scale producers are better equipped to handle the demand for creative and innovative solutions to problems than international competitors. This is achieved by advancements in technology, increased access to manufacturing tools, an easier transition from idea to prototype, changes in consumer purchasing patterns, and a direct line to sell to those consumers through the internet. Makers are able to learn the skills and access the tools needed to prototype their ideas at community maker spaces. Makers can then market and sell their products to online sellers such as eBay and Etsy. And when they're ready to expand their businesses, companies such as Etsy are helping makers connect with domestic small batch manufacturers to scale up production through their new service, Etsy Manufacturing. This will allow makers to expand their business. It will also provide work for domestic small manufacturers who have a difficult time competing on large orders with overseas competitors who benefit from lower wages and weaker environmental standards. New crowdfunding programs such as Kickstarter make it easier for makers to get their ideas into production. In 2013, 3 million people pledged over $480 million to crowdfunding projects. In addition, big manufacturers are taking notice. GE partners with makers through their quirky website. App-enabled gadgets are selected by their online community and co-branded by GE. Levi's Jeans partners with artists to provide one-of-a-kind products as a part of their Levi's Makers tag. One key component most associated with the maker movement is 3D printing. And if you let me brag a little, I'll say that I'm the only member of Congress with a 3D printer in his office. 3D printers are now cheaper and easier to operate than ever, but they're also becoming more useful and no longer viewed as a passing fad. In fact, this year, NASA 3D printed a tool in space, and volunteers across the country are coming together to create affordable prosthetics for children. Now, unlike most manufacturers and industries, makers often share online what they've learned so others can improve upon their designs. Thingiverse and GrabCAD have vast archives of 3D designs, some that can be personalized. At the federal level, continued support by the agencies such as the National Science Foundation and the Department of Energy will promote further advances in emerging manufacturing technologies and make them more powerful and more accessible. Educators have also seen the value of making. For many years, problem-solving and critical thinking skills have been promoted by the education community. Now educators have the means to easily teach these skills through maker spaces set up in shops, classrooms, and libraries. Students who participate in making activities learn collaboration, communication, and entrepreneurship skills. Those skills valued by employers. Learning through making will feed the pipeline of businesses and industries that need workers who are trained to think differently about design and can work with multiple disciplines on a product or project. Central to this idea of making is the fact that students can learn to be creative and innovative. Makerspaces in libraries and schools have the potential to transform education. But one of the issues the maker movement will have to tackle is the underrepresentation of minorities and women at maker fairs and maker spaces. Bringing maker spaces into schools and libraries can help students from diverse backgrounds gain access to resources and opportunities they would not otherwise have. The maker movement is changing the national economic and educational landscape, and I can tell you that Washington is beginning to listen. Earlier this year, Democratic Whip Steny Hoyer added Fab Labs and maker spaces to the Make It in America agenda. This summer, I testified on a panel with Congressman Bill Foster about encouraging domestic manufacturing, and we both talked about Fab Labs and maker spaces. If policymakers can come together and be supportive, this may be a catalyst that brings manufacturing back to America. The potential impact on the United States economy is huge. I have a homework assignment for all of you. As you set up makerspaces in your schools and libraries, I want you to invite your local elected officials to come see what you're doing. And if you get a member of Congress in the door, make sure to encourage that member of Congress to join the Congressional Maker Caucus. Also, as you plan and implement your makerspaces, know that your efforts are helping foster the next generation of American innovators. Thank you so much for having me here today, and I'd be happy now to take some of your questions.
Excellent. Congressman Takano, can you hear me?
I can.
Excellent. I'll pop on camera as well. And we have several questions. And I want to invite our participants to continue to place those questions in the chat and we will grab them. But one of the first questions I wanted to ask you is, what, aside from reaching out to their elected official, what can this group of 250 librarians across the country do to help you with your cause of furthering making in an effort to further manufacturing?
Well, I think librarians are an interesting group of people. They, who would have thought that the old image of the kind of quiet, maybe stern scold that was keeping people quiet and shushing people would reinvent that role as books now could be electronically or could be digitized. So that was one big transformation. So we moved into this age of information, right? The librarian was moving from books to information. And now the librarian, again, is reinventing that role. And we're entering the age of making. As librarians, who would have thought they would be on the edge of technology? That very leaders in a school environment that would familiarize the faculty. So I think really you're going to have to get the faculty into a makerspace. And if you don't have one yet, you're going to have to try and get them to one and begin to share that vision with an administrator who will get it. And you got to be smart about the school politics and the district politics. So more than even just your elected officials in the community. Then I would also, so you got to get your faculty excited. You got to get, there's usually one or two faculty members that will really get it, and then be the lead and be your ally. And then I think the next thing you got to do is try to connect with someone in the community that's in an elected role, like a school board member. It could be a city council person. It could be try to hunt out someone who's got a title like economic development. They could be at the county. They could be at the city. And then think about who is the manufacturer in your community that would have a stake in this. In my own community, the Vocademy, which is actually a private makerspace, it's actually not publicly funded, gained an ally in an engineering company, a company that actually manufactures electronic components. And I won't go into all the details, but they do a lot of research. They hire a lot of engineers and researchers to test out products, to create new products. And one of the struggles that the owner of this company had was that they would get people out of engineering school with very little practical machining experience. They had a lot of theoretical book knowledge and could do all the calculus and math, but they weren't very handy with their hands and machinery. So I actually could think of 2 or 3 manufacturers in my community that want to engage in sending their employees in their off hours, give them access to the academy, just to have them have the ability to tinker around, because that's the kind of employees, that's the kind of people they have at their companies. So you want to look at those allies in the private sector that exist within your community, and let them know what you're doing in schools, and they may even become supporters of yours financially. But I think they'll be quite excited to see the public schools take the lead in disseminating or making or democratizing this exciting wave of machines that are coming out for people to use.
So a follow-up to that, how can schools accommodate hands-on learning in this testing and standards landscape?
Well, you asked a good question for someone in Washington. I'm someone who saw firsthand. I was in the classroom up until 2012, so I taught for 23 years, so almost 24 years. So I knew what teaching was like before people here in Washington passed the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, a version known as No Child Left Behind. It was very well intentioned, but the idea that you would test every student every year and then establish standards and benchmarks that they'd have to meet, and then if they didn't, they would get some sort of sanctions. What I call test and punish focused educators on trying to pass tests instead of engage students in learning. There has to be some accountability, but I don't think we quite figured it out at the federal level. And I'm working very hard to get the federal government to ease up on the federal accountability. I want to move away from test and punish to test and reveal. So some of the work that has to get done is here in Washington. And I think there is a sense all across the country, both in conservative and among liberals, that at least test and punish is something that we really need to reconsider, question, and I would like to roll it back. And that was a good question. In that, I do think that a high-stakes testing environment really inhibits the kind of engaging project-based learning, hands-on learning that the advanced technology and manufacturing make available to teachers and students today. So I think together we're going to, I came to Congress to be a voice for teachers who actually see, who felt the burden of teaching under No Child Left Behind, and I tried as much as possible to explain the realities of a test and punish classroom and a test and punish school to people. So I'm carrying that fight on here. But I'm hopeful that people are going to that we're going to get past this moment. There's just too much exciting stuff to do with this new technology that's going to engage and make students curious. And come on, I was at the first White House Maker Fair, and to see a young middle school student who was not the most brilliant, rocket scientist type of student, but he was a student that could use his hands and a student that liked to make things. And I forget this young man's name, but he actually made an air gun that could shoot marshmallows. And he actually manufactured this gun using these, and it was a gun that Secret Service actually let through the gates, and I think he actually shot President Obama with his gun, shot him with a marshmallow. Once we get lawmakers to understand that this is where it's really at in education, we need to return to this kind of learning. We're practical people. We want to do what people want. Parents got to know about this too. It's at the ballot box. We got to reorient people what we really ought to be doing in the classroom.
So one of our participants asked, who I know is a librarian, asked, since you've met many makers and seen many different makers' spaces, have you seen anything that libraries or librarians are doing wrong when it comes to these spaces?
Actually, I think librarians are, those of you who are on this, I don't know what it calls, a podcast or webinar, webcast. I think you're on the cutting edge. I think you are the pioneers and you're inventing this. And I think you just got to have the maker spirit. You got to be willing to try things, fail at things, tinker around, see what works and what doesn't work. And then hopefully you have built the beginnings of a community of maker librarians and educators on this webcast that you're going to teach each other how to do it right. Good luck. That's all I got to say. Good luck, and I wish you well. I want you, and we need you to succeed. We need you to succeed.
I guess, so one follow-up question to that. With government support of maker movement in libraries, do you think funding will follow? And has anyone actually started that process that you know of?
Well, actually, new funding is hard to come by in Congress, and we always, whenever we try to get new money for something, there's really not new money. We have to, you know, so raising revenue is generally off the table. So at this moment in time, and so whenever I want to get new money to something, I have to take it from someplace else, and that can be, as you can imagine, contentious because the person, members of Congress who got a certain program they like, don't like you taking it away from them. But there is money that the administration already has through the various agencies and various federal departments. So, for instance, the National Endowment for the Arts is involved in making grants for maker-related projects, projects that relate to the intersection of maker technology and the arts. As you know, it's not just about the maker movement is not just about engineering or electronics. It's also about how you bring elements of design and creativity into using these machines. The Institute for Museum and Library Services is another example of a government agency. The Department of Education itself is looking at ways to focus existing resources toward empowering this sort of activity in schools. Now, so we are looking at creative ways at the federal level to channel financial resources into your hands. But, you know, some of you are in states where you have local school districts that can vote on bonds, for example, local bonds. In California, we're a huge state, and the local school districts and the community college districts can actually issue bonds, and the maker technology, the machinery, is a capital investment, and you can often include that with the construction budget. You can also use often the bond money to buy capital equipment. So don't give up on your local sources, and that's why it's important to try and get legislators. Some of you may not have that local authority, and you may need to go to the state legislatures. In my own community in Riverside, the city of Riverside has its own library district. It's a separate, and so the library district can issue bonds to build libraries. They haven't done it very often, but within that bond issue, they can also reserve a certain amount of that budget for buying equipment, which is what the maker machinery is all about. So the county may have a way to help you with the capital requirements, as well as your city may be interested in this. It may be a partnership between among, say, the school library, the city and county libraries, and you may want to come up with a community makerspace. So these are all possibilities, and you may bring a sort of public-private partnership together where you mix some of the public resources that you are able to raise with the manufacturers in the area. So don't just look to the federal government, although I can tell you that the federal government is among the agencies that are trying to look. They're aware of this movement and they want to help it.
Excellent. So I love speaking with people about their careers. So I'm really interested in knowing, what is the biggest difference for you between being a teacher and a politician?
Oh, well, being a teacher is a far, far more difficult job than being a politician here in Washington. I mean, I was lucky to get one aide. If I was teaching a class and I had maybe some special ed students or people with developmental English needs. I was an English teacher and taught in high school, and now I have a whole team of very smart people that help me wade through the legislation, and I have been known to grade a paper or two while I've been a member of Congress. And actually, if you look up online, say my name and corrected papers that I've done, I've had to school a few people on the right way to think about something. Immigration reform being one of them. So I still grade papers, but not as many. And that is another example of why teaching is a much more difficult job. It's like stacks of papers to grade. I think since I've been in office, I've graded maybe 2 papers. You know what? I can't grade too many of my colleagues' papers because it would just make them mad, and I would get a reputation in Congress for being that teacher member. And so anyway, I'll tell you this: just like teaching, it's a joy to come to work. I know that when I had a class, I once, by accident, in the last couple of years, I was teaching just because of the scheduling clerk. I had a couple of senior sections that were like, one was like 15 kids, the other was like 17 students, and there was no greater joy than to meet with those 2 sections, to know every kid's name and to know them so well. It was like teaching a seminar. Look, when teachers have the right working conditions, I tell people, I'm going to say this publicly, which I probably shouldn't, but I often say, look, we know that we're not going to make hedge fund salaries, right? I mean, people say teachers should be paid way more, and they should, but most people I know didn't go into teaching because they were looking to make a lot of money. They had different motivations to be a teacher, and they've accepted the lot that they had. But treat teachers well. Don't make them don't blame them for everything that goes wrong in education. Give them decent conditions, like a decent class size, and it's a very joyful and joyous calling. I don't call it a job; I call teaching a calling. And being a member of Congress is a very similar thing. It's answering a calling. And you've got to go to your job to be a good teacher every day, knowing it's a calling and that you've been called to do something very important. So in some respects, I would say teaching is a much harder job in some ways, but it demands just as much spiritual resources as being a member of Congress is. You got to get up each day and know that you're serving people and serving kids, and I salute my former colleagues all the time, and as one administration, when I was teacher and I was visited by someone from, I think they had a sub-cabinet level position, they found that I was a teacher, and they said, "Oh, you're doing God's work, you're doing the Lord's work," and I believe that it's true.
So we have one final question that we can wrap on. What do other politicians need to know and or see to support funding, personnel, etc.? So, what advice do you have for the librarians in terms of what they can tell their elected officials?
Well, I'm not going to call out people by name. I mean, just out of my hand. But I think that message, if you agree with what I said, and I think most people would agree with me, that, look, it's, that all these schemes to improve education, I do think we got to get off this idea that we got to test and punish to death everything, and that, I think it's a terrible trajectory we got on. The second thing is, don't forget that teaching is a calling, and that all these schemes to kind of cash out teacher pensions and to pay people a few years of good salary, and then maybe have those people move on. The teachers, good teachers are always going to get better over time because it's like an art. You get better as you practice your art more. And I don't think people just look at it as a job. They look at it as a calling. They look at it as something they're going to put their life into. And we need to structure the salary and the pension, and retirement, all that accordingly. We're not so. Right now, there's a tug of war going on, and some people want to privatize every single thing. I don't know that. I just don't believe that a privatization model is going to work in public education, and that there's still far more control and transparency with local school boards running most of the show. My job with the federal government is to make sure that poor kids, poor communities, that we find some way to relieve the inequities in our country. I don't have a strategy on a list of legislators for you to talk to. But I think it's incumbent upon you to learn their voting records but the best thing is for you, all of you, whether you have a liberal or conservative member of Congress or whatever local party, move forward with these innovations. Have the courage to lead and be bold and to be sure-footed. That this is, I think, a good direction to go in. As far as the maker spaces you want to create in your libraries. Invite them in, get them excited about what you're doing, build support for the public schools. And that's my last, I think, 2 words. Let's move from test and punish to test and reveal, so build and support. And we're gonna get the community to build, we need to generate the political will to build and support our public schools by inviting them in and seeing what we're doing with maker spaces, how we're upgrading the curriculum. We've got to find it within ourselves as educators to lead the changes and not be the effect of those changes.
Congressman Mark Takano, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's wonderful to hear from you and to have you kick off our 4-week Maker Workshop. So thank you again.
Now we'll carry on. Good luck.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again soon.